Okay, we are back in CoSpaces. Instead of spending a lot of time building our environments, we're going to start with a pre-built environment, and we're going to focus mostly on coding. And the reason that we're doing this is we're not going to use code blocks. We're going to use something that looks really familiar. But even though this looks a lot like JavaScript, it's something called Typescript. And Typescript is a little bit more robust than JavaScript because it's a strongly typed programming language, but it does build off of JavaScript. One of the first things that we need to do to program in TypeScript, I've given you comments so that you can follow along, but let's start building some code. So the first thing we got to do is we got to create some variables. And these are variables that in CoSpaces, they would show up in your dropdown. And they would show up there because you would go into your objects and say using code blocks. But we're not using code blocks. So we don't need to turn this on. We just need to be able to reference it with a variable. So to do that, I need to click on this get item copy button, and it's going to copy for me how to get this billboard object. But I need some way to reference it. So I'm going to create a variable called billboard. And I'm going to set it equal to that item that I just got out of my UI. Okay, let's create some more. So the first task for this lesson is we want to be able to control this billboard, change the text, change the color, and allow the user to choose what that billboard's going to say. We're also going to do something a little fancy. We're going to change the color of this building to be a complementary color with the billboard. So I am also going to need a reference to the billboard text, which is actually a different element. So I'm going to click on that, go to code, and do get item. And it's going to return for me another data type of type text item. And then the last thing I want is the actual building on the left. So I'm going to create a variable called building. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to do the get item on that as well. Okay, so this is a little different than the variables that we've been working with. The variables that we've worked on to learn JavaScript were all primitive variables. And those are things like booleans, integers, strings. They all come with the language. But these are variables of data types like cuboid, text item, animated item. These are all custom data types. And the reason that we can have custom data types is somebody created those in a library. So all of these exist because they are part of the CoSpaces class library. And they're all defined in what we call an API, an application programming interface. And we can actually go and find the interface for CoSpaces, and it'll tell you about every single class, every single method that's available in this library. So this is a library that we're going to use to code our virtual reality. Okay, so these are just variables. They don't really do anything, so there's really nothing to test yet. But I want to assign these to their initial value. So before I assign them to their initial value, I'm going to create some special variables that I call constants because I just want a place to put these new values that I'm going to assign it to. So I'm going to have a constant for the billboard when it is a welcome message. So I'm going to call that the billboard welcome text. And let's call our city ARS City. And I'm also going to want to have a color for that welcome billboard. So I just happen to know that blue is 00255. And I want that building next to it to be a complementary color. So I'm going to make another variable. And complementary just means the colors added together make white. So in this case, I'm taking all the numbers of my original color and subtracting them from 255 to get my next number. Okay, so here's some default values that I can set to my objects, but I haven't set them yet. All I've done is created a reference to my objects, and then I've created some constants that I want to use as an option for the billboard. But I can at least initialize them. Actually, put that in the wrong place. Let me move that up to right there, because that's going to be the space for my alternative billboards. But I'm going to skip that for now, just so that I can test setting the initial values. So I want my billboard color to be the billboard welcome color. I want that billboard text to be the billboard welcome text. And then I want that building to be a complementary color. Okay, so that's enough for me to test something. Let's see if that initial value works. Yep, there it is. ARS blue. And then the complementary to blue is a bright yellow. Okay, so we've created some variables of custom data types that came from the CoSpaces library. We've set up some literal constants and gave it some named constants to use. And then we set those properties to some named constants. Now we want to give it some options. So let's create a second set of billboard properties for a sporting event. And we have a pretty successful volleyball team. So let's give a separate billboard for them. And instead of using a simple color blue, let's build it off of our Canva color wheel. And I'm going to pick okay, let's pick this. It's not really a named color, but instead of using the RGB triplet, I'm going to use this Hex Triplet instead. And I could still calculate its complement, but since I already have Canva, I'm going to just use the complement that Canva calculated. Okay, so now I have a different set of billboard options. But I'm not going to change this because I want this to be the initial value. I want them to be able to choose this other color. So there's a way that I can accept input from the user. And it is using this library of functions under GUI, which stands for Graphical User Interface, and HUD, which stands for Heads Up Display, which is the fact that these info panels pop up as a display. Okay, so first, let's just give a simple information panel. This information panel is just going to give the user some instructions. Okay, so this is a function call, and I need to pass an argument to this function call, but it's this very special type of argument that I call a JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So I'm going to send it what I call an object, but this object has multiple properties. So to be able to send an object in object notation, I have to enclose all these properties with a curly bracket and then end it with a curly bracket. But I'm going to do that inside an argument to a function. So it's going to have a kind of funky syntax. We usually don't use the curly bracket unless we're defining a function, but here we're using it to enclose an object. So I'm going to do the start curly bracket. It automatically creates the end curly bracket for me. And then I'm going to press enter so that I can specify all of my properties on a separate line. I'm going to go ahead and go to the end of this function call and put my semicolon so I don't forget it, and then come back and set the title to welcome, and then set the text to give them some instructions, which is basically click on the billboard to change the advertisement. Okay, let's test that. Okay, I get my information panel, and I have not yet responded to allow the user to change the billboard. So let's do that next. Okay, so in the same place that I found this showInfoPanel, there's another panel under GUI.HUD called the choice panel. So I'm going to choose showChoicePanel. I'm going to pass it some arguments. This time, I'm still going to send it a JSON object, but this time I'm going to send it a question. Change the, let's just call it change the billboard below. And then I can provide up to 6 answers, but I'm only going to do 4. The first one is going to be the welcome billboard. I'm also going to have a concert billboard. I'll have an insurance billboard, and then finally our sports billboard. But that is just specifying the text that's going to show up on the choice panel. I then have to write some code to say what's going to happen when somebody answers. And for me to specify the options, it is in the format of what we call a Lambda expression. And they borrow this term from math, but basically I can pass it an argument, and that argument is going to get fed into the body of this function. So I want to know the answer index, and given that answer index, I can use it inside the body of this function. So if answer index equals 1, I know that I should set it to the welcome message, which, you know what, I already have the code up here, so I'm just going to copy that and paste it down here. And I like my indents to line up, so I put those indents back. And then I know I have a sports billboard, so I'm going to put that logic in as well. Oops. Okay, so this isn't all 4 options, but it's the first 2. And you can use the same pattern to finish the last 2, but let's check and make sure this works. You know what? I didn't want it to immediately, the color works, but I didn't want it to immediately ask for that. I wanted to wait for them to actually click on the billboard. So I actually have to do one more thing. I do want it to immediately welcome and show them the instructions, but the instructions say to click on the billboard. So I actually need to wait for them to click on the billboard. And I'm going to do that by doing an onClick event. And so inside my onClick event, I need to give it a Lambda expression. And that Lambda expression is going to be an empty argument that will then perform whatever I put between these curly brackets. And what I want to put is this show choice that I've already written. So I'm going to copy that and paste it back into there. And since this is in the body of that onClick, I'm going to tab it over so it indents. Okay, so now when I play this, it does only give me the instructions, and then not until I click on the welcome ARS does it give me the option to change. And then I can change it back. Okay, the other 2 don't work, but it just means that we have to design 2 more billboards and add it to the logic.